Hi everyone, my name is Rafael Karambatis and I'm going to present to you big code is different than big vocabulary. Open vocabulary models for source code. This is joint work with my colleagues Philip Papi, Roman Ropes, Charles Sutton and Andrea James. All the artifacts for this work are publicly available online. So our trip starts in 2012 with a naturalness hypothesis. That this software has statistical properties similar to natural language. Inspired by this, researchers found out that language models for code were surprisingly effective. They also found that code properties are stronger inside a project than across projects. So what would be code language models useful for? There are various applications like auto-completion, improving code readability, program repair, identifying buggy code, API migration, identifier name suggestion, or even transfer learning. So let's talk about the main problem we try to answer in this paper. That is, how do we model software's vocabulary? This is a very important issue. Developers in general are free to choose names, and they can make arbitrary complex identifiers, like the example you can see in the slides. Furthermore, there is huge out-of-vocabulary rate as identifier names proliferate. So, for example, even if we use an 11 million vocabulary from the train set, then on our test set, 40% of the instances of identifiers we see will be out of vocabulary. As you may understand, using a vocabulary of 11 million in a model, that's probably almost impossible. So usually we'd use something much smaller, like 75K. And in that case, 80% of the test set would be out of vocabulary. So that would make our model actually not that useful. Another problem is, what do we do to handle rare identifiers? Right, so it was also shown before by researchers that having a huge token language model, that would be impossible to scale behind a few hundred projects. So our goal here is to be able to scale this on larger corpora, like more than tens of thousands of projects. So we started by, our first contribution was to study how the design choices affect vocabulary. So we started by handling comments, string literals, white space. We tried to filter infrequent tokens. We also measured what happens when you split compound names from like underscore or camel case. We found out that all these cases, they were not enough for obtaining a manageable vocabulary. So we came up with using, the idea was to use BPE to split identifiers. I'm going to talk more later in depth about this. What should be highlighted is the insights we got are useful knowledge for all source code models. So we also, another contribution is we actually made a BPE neural language model that's super small, and it can utilize certain clever tricks like dynamic adaptation and a clever code completion algorithm to give you state-of-the-art results. Last, we evaluated our model on 3 large corpora. Each of these is more than 10,000 projects. We also evaluated on the task of bug highlighting using defects4j. So what is BPE, or byte pair encoding? Imagine that we start with an initial vocabulary of a set of characters, so each character is a different entry in the vocabulary, and then at each iteration we merge the most frequently occurring sequences of characters. So we basically find the 2 most frequent pairs, you merge them, and you insert that into the vocabulary. I'm showing you an example where we actually have the sequence of characters protected, space private. This is basically how the algorithm will work here. And next is actually 2 examples using BP with a vocabulary of 2000 and vocabulary of 10,000 on real code, how that would be actually split into subtokens. So the thing about BPE is it learns the least entropic segmentation. And that can help us to come up with a model that has no infrequent entries. So it gives us basically better parameter estimation. The trick here is that our vocabulary is flexible, it's open now, it can handle everything. We don't have any OOVs, and we don't have the frequency issues anymore. Then we came up with a beam search algorithm for doing the code completion because it's a subtoken model. I'm not going to go into details, but if you want to, you can basically pause the video and read the slide. Another thing we did was dynamic adaptation. So imagine basically that you can get a huge model from some company, some IDE vendor, and then you want to kind of adapt this on your model to get, project-specific information. You might not want, though, to give them your code back. So you should be able to do this very quickly and very easily on your own. So we came up with an algorithm for this. Basically, the intuition is, if you had a single project, you can't do it on your own because the model you would learn would be actually bad because you don't have enough data, and it would be also very slow to retrain the whole global model on your own. So what we do is we do like some clever updates on your project and adapt the model, and that's actually very light to do. Next, I'm going to talk about some baselines. So we used n-grams, nested n-grams, which is basically take the hierarchy of the project. Cas n-grams, we basically cas sequences that have appeared before in the project and is not test data. Then the next is like having a token NLM and subtoken NLM. The datasets we used were basically a Java, a C, and a Python corpus. Here's some statistics for them. And we split this into a big train set, a smaller train set, some small subpart to learn the BP encoding, a validation set, and a test set. And then we evaluated the model on two tasks. That is code completion, where we measure entropy, that is the degree of uncertainty of the predictions, and MRR, which is basically the average of the inverse rank of the predictions. And for bug detection, we measure how much the entropy drops on bug fixes. Here's some results. I'm not going to talk about them, but you can pause and have a look, or you can read the paper if you want more information. But basically what we want to highlight here is that we have made very, very extensive evaluation. And as you can see, our model is basically state-of-the-art in all cases. I'm gonna finish by saying that everything is publicly available. Just to summarize, what we did here was we wanted to look how can we basically model source code's vocabulary. Traditional models result in kind of giant model that sometimes it can do the work, but it's not very useful. Instead, we came up with a very, very tiny model that can do the same thing. And if you combine it with the CAS and the dynamic adaptation algorithm, it's going to give you state-of-the-art results. Thank you.